Hey, one thing I thought I would mention before we got started, we're not through with Exodus, but we've got, just a few more chapters. And I'm wondering where you want to go from Exodus. And I would like to suggest Deuteronomy. And part of the reason for that is so much of what we have covered in Genesis and Exodus is repeated in Deuteronomy. I had a professor in seminary who believed that Deuteronomy was written as a history of the Hebrew people that was placed in the temple. It was sort of an inaugural book for the temple. And there's just so much that we cover now that we're going to look at again. I just thought going to Deuteronomy might be a good spot to go. And, I'm not sure I want to spend a lot of time with Numbers and Leviticus. So if we skip those, then we're into Deuteronomy.
As fast as we go, we're probably a month away anyway.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I'm not doing myself any favors by jumping to Deuteronomy because there's a lot of stuff in there. But I think if we want to do a complete Bible study, then Deuteronomy it is. Mm-hmm. Now, we're in chapter 19. Mm-hmm. And it's an interesting book because we're going to end up with a different concept of how the Ten Commandments were given. So, Kathy, are you going to read?
Yep. On the third new moon after the people of Israel had gone out from the land of Egypt, on that day they came into the wilderness of Sinai. They set out from Rephidim and came into the wilderness of Sinai, and they encamped in the wilderness. Then Israel encamped before the mountain while Moses went up to God. The Lord called to him out of the mountain, saying, "Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob and tell the people of Israel, you yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the people of Israel." So Moses came and called the elders of the people and set before them all these words that the Lord had commanded him. All the people answered together and said, "All that the Lord has spoken we will do." And Moses reported the words of the people to the Lord. And the Lord said to Moses, "Behold, I am coming to you in a thick cloud, that the people may hear what I speak with you, and may also believe you forever." When Moses told the words of the people to the Lord said to Moses, "Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their garments, and be ready for the third day. For on the third day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. And you shall set limits for the people all around, saying, take care not to go up into the mountain or touch the edge of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall be put to death. No hand shall touch him, but he shall be stoned or shot. Whether beast or man, he shall not live. When the trumpet sounds a long blast, they may come up to the mountain." So Moses went down from the mountain to the people and consecrated the people, and they washed their garments. And he said to the people, "Be ready for the third day. Do not go near a woman." On the morning of the third day, There were thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud on the mountain and a very loud trumpet blast, so that all the people in the camp trembled. Then Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God, and they took their stand at the foot of the mountain. Now Mount Sinai was wrapped in smoke because the Lord had descended on it in fire. The smoke of it went up like the smoke of a kiln, and the whole mountain trembled greatly. And as the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and God answered him in the thunder. The Lord came down on Mount Sinai to the top of the mountain, and the Lord called Moses to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up. And the Lord said to Moses, "Go down and warn the people, lest they break through to the Lord to look, and many break through to the Lord to look, and many of them perish. Also let the priests who come near to the Lord consecrate themselves, lest the Lord break out against them." And Moses said to the Lord, "The people cannot come up to Mount Sinai, for you yourself warned us, saying, 'Set limits around the mountain and consecrate it.' And the Lord said to him, 'Go down and come up, bringing Aaron with you. But do not let the priests and the people break through to come up to the Lord, lest he break out against them." So Moses went down to the people and told them.
Okay. You just kind of wonder who's playing that trumpet.
And what song?
Hmm?
And what song?
Yeah, what song? Verses 20 to the end of the chapter, 20 to 25, are considered to be a secondary source, telling the same thing that we found out in the previous verses. Imagine that. We have duplication of information. And, you know, this is not usually what's talked about when we talk about how Moses got the Ten Commandments. I mean, this is a different story. And when you've got Smoke on the Mountain, who recorded that song?
Deep Purple, I think.
Smoke on the Mountain. Smoke on the Mountain, that's Elois writing. Fire, with that pillar of fire that they followed, the pillar of cloud, that would be Yahweh's stories. But having this cloud come down, and God saying, you know, get the people ready, have them put on clean clothes. You ever wonder where?
Church clothes.
Yeah, you ever wonder where we get that whole concept of church clothes? It comes from this, that, you know, you're going to meet the Lord. And of course, we all know where the Lord is, down the hall.
Yeah.
And every church believes that. Well, we know the real Lord is down the hall here. So,
is this symbolic of, like, pastors go into to preach in the, what do they stand in? The pulpit.
Mhm.
But we can't. Does that have something to do with this? Is this where they get that tradition?
that could be.
Yeah.
I mean, whoever's preaching gets the pulpit. So if a layperson is preaching,
I just remember growing up, and my mom would clean the church. Well, we better not be caught in the pulpit.
that's a mama rule.
Yeah.
Good parenting.
If you go with your mother to clean the church, she wants you to sit in the pew. She doesn't want you messing with anything. There's stuff that can be broken. All right, now we're getting some good stuff. Really good stuff. Chapter 20.
And God spoke all these words, saying, "I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter or your male servant or your female servant or your livestock or the sojourner who is within your house. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy.
Okay, let's pause there for a minute, because one of the commentaries I was looking at has 2 to 3 pages dedicated to each one of the commandments. But one thing with that first commandment, we've got one of the longest descriptions of the commandment. You know, that verse 4, 5, and 6, those are long. And God wants to make sure that people understand their relationship to God. And he says, you shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents into the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations to those who love me and keep my commandments.
The Jews count the commandments differently than we do.
Mm-hmm.
They take verses 1 and 2 as the first commandment,
Right,
and then you shall have no other gods before me as the second commandment.
right. But we're dealing with the Christian. So what we have here is people who, in that time, they had Baal and all these other gods, and they would, they would build idols. And God is really not saying you can't make a little idol. What he's saying is, don't worship it. It's like St. Benedict. We don't worship Benedict. But he serves as a reminder.
That's
But God is being, now, is Moses saying this is what God told me? First verse in chapter 20. God spoke all these words. No stone, nothing written down. This is God speaking out of the cloud, right direct to these people. You must worship me as God. And then you shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. What does that mean? Well, when you say it's the God's honest truth, it better be.
yeah.
You can't use his name. And the Sabbath, there is some connection here to, I think it's chapter 2, verse 1
Mm-hmm.
of Genesis.
In Deuteronomy, there's a different explanation for the day of rest.
Pardon?
In Deuteronomy, there's a different explanation
Yes.
for the day of rest.
Well, God is going to go into more detail later on here, but that's another long passage. Keep the Sabbath. And it's, when I read that, I think of Monty Python. You all familiar with Monty Python? That's that would, where God would say, keep the Sabbath. And one of them would say, well, can my slave work on the... No, I said, nobody works on the Sabbath. Well, how about if my son wants to go out and milk the cows? No! I mean, this is to clarify any of know your animals, nor any foreigner residing, Lord, if we got an Egyptian, can we work him to death? No! He's a foreigner residing in your town. Now, it's interesting. What town are they in?
They're not in it.
They're not. They're standing at the foot of Mount Sinai. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven, and he rested on the seventh. Therefore, God blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. That's another long, long commandment. But then we get to 12. Kathy, read 12.
Oh, may I
Yes.
ask a question? He's very specific about not your slaves, not your children, whatever. What about the wives? Were they just to keep things going? No,
No,
this is not a women's lib question.
No, that's a good question. Well, he covers...
It's so
I
specific.
think you got that right. I think the women are supposed to keep the food going.
Yeah. Well, it says, on this day neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, and most wives feel they fall into that category.
Okay.
So that means nobody. Remember I told you about my friend back in college who lived in a high-rise apartment that was mostly Jews, and they would hire him. You can't. An Orthodox Jew cannot turn on the television or change a TV channel. They can watch it, but they can't turn it on. Well, Saturday until sunset, it's still Sabbath. And if Michigan State or Michigan were playing football, they would pay this guy to come up and turn the television on and get the right channel. Long before stoves were automatic, where you could have an oven turn on, if, Mom would prepare a roast or whatever was for dinner, put it in the refrigerator. This guy would come up, take it out of the refrigerator, put it in the oven and turn it on. So they could eat. I mean, he made a decent living.
Yeah.
Back then they get $5. That's pretty good money. And, he would just go from floor to floor, keep a list on, whose television needs to be turned on. And if there were, doubleheader on the game, he'd have to, okay, I got to check. I got to keep listening to this game because when this game ends, I got to go turn it so I can watch Notre Dame. So, for the Jews, you could do nothing.
But what did they do about their livestock? Did they feed their livestock? Of course, in those days, it was mostly pasturing anyway.
The goats.
Yeah,
You have to milk the cows and the goats. They can't go 2 days.
well,
That's what I was thinking.
They
Yeah.
just
I don't know. It's in the gospel.
yeah,
We read it.
writers.
Doesn't the farmer have to feed and water his oxen? I think it's what verse 2 back in the gospel.
I think it says, when it talks about nor your animals, it's working the animals. But I think milking would
Making
mean,
sure that water and food.
yeah,
Well, I think you have to milk them because we grew up on a farm. And after too long, they would get mastitis.
yeah, you got to milk them. That's the hardest part about being a dairy farmer. You spend all your time with those cows. And,
It's easier now though because they've got those automatic milkers.
right. But I had, when I was in graduate school at Michigan State, one of my colleagues' husband was a dairy farmer. And he said, dairy farms, because the problem is your cows were constantly had to be milked. And he said, what we've discovered is we try to get them all in season at the same time. That way, we get a couple months off. 'Cause cows have to go dry for a couple months. And then they throw a calf and you can milk them again. And he said, it just became such a problem. You know, when you had a dairy farm, there was usually some kid down the road that you could hire to come in and milk the cows. But kid down the road now has a car, and the last thing he wants, he doesn't want to put his hands on some cow's teat. He'd rather find somebody else. So now they're taking those cattle and making them dry. He said, that way I can go on vacation. So that's a terrible, terrible job. Okay, Kathy, let's go through 16.
Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. That was 16. No.
That's
You
12.
shall not commit murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's.
Okay. Now, have you noticed when we get to 13 through 16, see how long those are? They didn't expand, the Lord did not expand on those. He picks that up later. But honor your father and your mother, that was a big thing for Jews. And I might mention parenthetically, the gospel this week, when Jesus said to one guy, follow me. And the guy said, I need to bury my father. Part of that is that honoring your father. Now, what the gospel doesn't clearly say is, Dad wasn't dead. You got to go home and wait for Dad to die. And that's why Jesus said, let the dead bury the dead. A lot of times the gospel or the Bible doesn't really clarify for us. We just have to try to figure it out.
The first 4 commandments are our relationship with God, and the last 6 are our relationship with each other.
Right. And that last commandment in verse 17, no lusting after your neighbor's house, or wife, or servant, or maid, or ox, or donkey. Don't set your heart on anything that is your neighbor's. Wow.
But you can like their car.
Yeah.
Anything is broad enough to cover that.
Yeah.
Just
You missed that part.
Just get into a subdivision and watch when some neighbor pulls in the driveway with a brand new car. Everybody's looking out the window. So, now, Kathy, we're going to continue on.
Now when all the people saw the thunder and the flashes of lightning and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking, the people were afraid and trembled, and they stood far off and said to Moses, you speak to us and we will listen, but do not let God speak to us lest we die. Moses said to the people, do not fear, for God has come to test you, that the fear of him may be before you, that you may not sin. The people stood far off while Moses drew near to the thick darkness where God was. And the Lord said to Moses, thus you shall say to the people of Israel, you have seen for yourselves that I have talked with you from heaven. You shall not make gods of silver to be with me, nor shall you make yourselves gods of gold. An altar of earth you shall make for me, and sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and your peace offerings, your sheep and your oxen. In every place where I cause my name to be remembered, I will come to you and bless you. If you make me an altar of stone, You shall not build it of hewn stone, for if you wield your tool on it, you profane it. And you shall not go up by steps to my altar, that your nakedness may not be exposed on it.
How did they make it?
Shall not
Well,
bear
they didn't
false
have underclothes, and if you went up high enough,
They were wearing short, they were wearing short skirts in those days.
This is a lesson for every young lady who's wearing a miniskirt riding up an escalator. When I read that, I thought, boy, the Lord is covering every bet there. No piggies. So, because the people said, oh boy, God's voice is pretty deep. What did he say? So God's telling Moses, give this message to the people. You've experienced firsthand how I spoke with you from heaven. Don't make gods of silver and gods of gold, and then set them alongside me. Key words there, alongside me. Make a little god. Don't put him with the real God. Don't put him alongside me. Make an earthen altar. Sacrifice your whole burnt offerings, your peace offering, your sheep and your cattle on it. Every place I cause my name to be honored in your worship, I will be there myself and bless you. If you use stones to make my altar, don't dress the stones. Don't make it fancy.
that means you just pick them up off the ground and stack them. You don't shape them, anything like that.
Okay,
This is the building of the temple. My reference to First Kings, which this is the building of the temple that wasn't supposed to be beautiful, just like Kathy said,
well, it's like the building of the first temple. And this is where the Deuteronomy thing comes into it. If that were written as a history to be placed in the temple, then they're saying, how come the stones aren't dressed? Well, because the Lord said, don't dress the stones. All right. Now, I find chapter 21 fascinating. Kathy, let's go into it.
Now these are the rules that you shall set before them. When you buy a Hebrew slave, he shall serve 6 years, and in the 7th he shall go free, for nothing. If he comes in single, he shall go out single. If he comes in married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master gives him a wife, and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out alone. But if the slave plainly says, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out free, then his master shall bring him to the God, and he shall bring him to the door of it, or the doorpost, and his master shall bore his ear through with an awl, and he shall be his slave forever. When a man sells his daughter as a slave, she shall not go out as the male slaves do. If she does not please her master, who has designated her for himself, then he shall let her be redeemed. He shall have no right to sell her to a foreign people, since he has broken faith with her. If he designates her for his son, he shall deal with her as with a daughter. If he takes another wife to himself, he shall not diminish her food, her clothing, or her marital rights. And if he does not do these 3 things for her, she shall go out for nothing, without payment of money. Whoever strikes a man so that he dies shall be put to death. But if he did not lie in wait for him, but the Lord let him fall into his hand, then I will appoint for you a place to which he may flee. But if a man willfully attacks another to kill him by cunning, you shall take him from my altar, that he may die. Whoever strikes his father or his mother shall be put to death. Whoever steals a man and sells him, and anyone found in possession of him, shall be put to death. Whoever curses his father or mother or his mother shall be put to death. Oh, come on. When men quarrel and one strikes the other with a stone or with his fist, and the man does not die but takes to his bed, then if the man rises again and walks outdoors with his staff, he who struck him shall be clear, only he shall pay for the loss of his time, and shall have him thoroughly healed. When a man strikes his slave, male or female, with a rod, and a slave dies under his hand, he shall be avenged. But if the slave survives a day or two, he is not to be avenged, for the slave is his money. When men strive together and hit a pregnant woman so that her children come out, but there is no harm, the one who hit her shall surely be fined, as the woman's husband shall impose on him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. But if there is harm, then you shall pay life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. When a man strikes the eye of his slave, male or female, and destroys it, he shall let the slave go free because of his eye. If he knocks out the tooth of his slave, male or female, he shall let the slave go free because of his tooth.
Okay, let's pause there for just a minute. Can you imagine people standing around hearing all this? I mean, if I were there, I'd be saying, Moses, you have a sheet of paper I can use. To write all these things down. This is the beginning of the whole Hebrew law. And here God is being very specific. If you poke out somebody's eye, they get to go. If it's a slave, they get to go free. If you knock out their tooth, they get to go free. Obviously the dentist had some in with the Lord. All of these rules, this is kind of a guideline for, how do you deal? Well, if someone hits father or mother, the penalty is death. Most of us wouldn't have children or grandchildren. If the murder was premeditated, cunningly plotted, and then dragged the killer away, even if it's from my altar, to put him to death. If someone hits another and death is the result, the penalty is death. And God is covering all these accidental death and things. And he gets into more detail in the next chapter. But it really is, I find it fascinating. Because usually when we talk about the 10 Commandments, we just, tick off 10 Commandments. But here, these are the laws that you are to place before them.
All of this about the servants, the Hebrew slaves, that's just, I can't.
It's about Hebrew slaves, not slaves of other nationalities.
Yeah.
If they have an Egyptian slave or a Cretan slave, this doesn't apply.
Wow, such a lot of minutiae seems
Yes.
to me.
Oh, yeah. Now,
They probably started getting attorneys and stuff.
Well,
Yeah.
who would keep track of all this?
well, there's always that joke that Jewish men either become a doctor or a lawyer.
I can see that.
And you can see why. The law is very specific. And it gets even better with verse 28. Kathy, let's read that one.
When an ox gores a man or a woman to death, the ox shall be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall not be liable. But if the ox has been accustomed to gore in the past, and its owner has been warned but has not kept it in, and it kills a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and its owner shall also be put to death. If a ransom is imposed on him, then he shall give for the redemption of his life whatever is imposed on him. If it gores a man's son or daughter, he shall be dealt with according to the same rule. If the ox gores a slave, male or female, the owner shall give their master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned. When a man opens a pit, or when a man digs a pit and does not cover it, and an ox or a donkey falls into it, the owner of the pit must make restoration. He shall give money to its owner, and the dead beast shall be his. When one man's ox butts another so that it dies, then they shall sell the live ox and share its price, and the dead beast also they shall share. Or if it is known that the ox has been accustomed to gore in the past and its owner has not kept it in, he shall repay ox for ox, and the dead beast shall be his.
Okay. I mean, this, I find this fascinating because, you know, we have a price set. I mean, and you ever wonder why the city puts all those flashing lights around the hole when they're working on the site?
Your ox might fall in.
Yes. And if, you know, if an ox is known to be, has gouged someone already, and now he's got a second person, the ox, and stone the ox to death, and you don't eat the meat. Now, as I read it, and we're going to go into 22 and cover, you know, even more of this, but I think that of all the conflict or controversy over putting the 10 Commandments up in the courthouse. Now, I've never, you know, I don't care. That you can stick the 10 Commandments, the Lord's Prayer, or a nice poem by some British poet. I'm irrelevant. That's irrelevant to me. But I'm thinking if you want to, you know, if you're going to insist on the 10 Commandments, well, then you've got chapter 21 and 22. Those ought to be up there too. Because these are straight from the Lord. And now, you know, these expand on the 10 Commandments, those original 10. And in chapter 22, we're going to get into that stealing part. And, you know, how much it's going to cost you. So, Kathy, let's go ahead. That clock isn't working up there, but we're good to
Well, I'll tell
go.
Father Ted, I'm junior warden now.
Uh-oh.
You're what?
I'm junior warden.
Oh, okay.
Buildings and grounds is my responsibility.
Okay, well, let's get that clock fixed.
If a man steals an ox or a sheep and kills it or sells it, he shall repay 5 oxen for the ox, and 4 sheep for a sheep. If a thief is found breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there shall be no blood guilt for him. But if the sun has risen on him, then shall be blood guilt for him. He shall surely pay. If he has nothing, then shall be sold for his theft. If the stolen beast is found alive in his possession, whether it is an ox or a donkey or a sheep, he shall pay double. If a man causes a field or a vineyard to be grazed over, or lets his beast loose and it feeds in another man's field, he shall make restitution from the best of his own field and in his own vineyard. If fire breaks out and catches in thorns, so that the stacked grain or the standing grain or the field is consumed, he who started the fire shall make full restitution. If a man gives his neighbor money or goods to keep safe and it is stolen from the man's house, then if the thief is found, he shall pay double. If the thief is not found, the owner of the house shall come near to God to show whether or not he has put his hand to his neighbor's property. For every breach of trust, whether it is for an ox, for a donkey, for a sheep, for a cloak, or for any kind of lost thing, of which one says, this is it, the case of both parties shall come before God. The one whom God condemns shall pay double to his neighbor. If a man gives to his neighbor a donkey or an ox or a sheep or any beast to keep it safe, and it dies or is injured or is driven away without anyone seeing it, an oath by the Lord shall be between them both, to see whether they or not he has put his hand to his neighbor's property. The owner shall accept the oath, and he shall not make restitution. But if it is stolen from him, he shall make restitution to its owner. If it is torn by beasts, let him bring it as evidence. He shall not make restitution for what has been torn. If a man borrows anything of his neighbor and is injured or dies, the owner not being with him, he shall make full restitution. If the owner was with it, he shall not make restitution. If it was hired, it came for its hiring fee. If a man seduces a virgin who is not betrothed and lies with her, he shall give the bride price for her and make her his wife. If her father utterly refuses to give her to him, he shall pay money equal to the bride price for virgins. You shall not permit a sorceress to live. Whoever lives with an animal shall be put to death. Whoever sacrifices to any god other than the Lord alone shall be devoted to destruction. You shall not wrong a sojourner or oppress him, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt. You shall not mistreat any widow or fatherless child. If you do mistreat them, and they cry out to me, I will surely hear their cry, and my wrath will burn, and I will kill you with a sword, and your wives shall become widows, and your children fatherless. If you lend money to any of my people with you who is poor, you shall not be like a moneylender to him, and you shall not exact interest from him. If ever you take your neighbor's cloak in pledge, you shall return it to him before the sun goes down. For that is his only covering, and it is cloak for his body. In what else shall he sleep? If he cries to me, I will hear, for I am compassionate. You shall not revile God, nor curse a ruler of your people. You shall not delay to offer from the fullness of your harvest and from the outflow of your presses. The firstborn of your sons you shall give to me. You shall do the same with your oxen and with your sheep. 7 days it shall be with its mother. On the 8th day you shall give it to me. You shall be consecrated to me. Therefore you shall not eat any flesh that is torn by beasts in the field. You shall throw it to the dogs.
Okay, when they're talking about the fields, These people don't have any fields. They're still wandering. But God is giving them a whole series of laws that they need to follow when they settle. And He's covering everything.
So does that mean this was written later when people were settled down and had fields?
Yes.
And it inserted back into this
Yes.
time frame?
Yes. It's kind of fascinating to think how they're thinking. I mean, what is important? Seducing a virgin, that was an important thing for the Jews. That purity. If roadkill. I know a lot of people in Kentucky and Tennessee who are going to have problems eating if they can't eat roadkill. But, God is covering everything. And in the next chapter, we're going to find out that God tells them what 3 annual festivals to celebrate. So obviously, these are not things that the Jews are getting at the foot of the mountain. I mean, you know, and God is saying, and I thought this was really important at the end of verse 27, God says, I'm compassionate. And if you look at most of these rules, they are compassionate. I mean, you know, how to behave. If someone gives a neighbor money or things for safekeeping and they are stolen from the neighbor's house, the thief, if caught, must pay back double. If the thief is not caught, the owner must be brought before God to determine whether the owner was the one who took the neighbor's goods. In all cases of stolen goods, whether oxen, donkeys, sheep, clothing, or anything that is missing, of which someone says, that's mine, both parties must come before the judges. The one the judges pronounce guilty must pay double to the other. Now, I mention that one because we're talking about judges. Remember what happened when Moses' father-in-law came to visit him? He said, look, one man can't do this whole job. You need to appoint people to serve as judges. So we got that, and now we have all the stuff that they would judge. There's no way one man can cover all these things. And I noticed, Kathy, yours was a little bit more appropriate. In verse 19,
Whoever lies with an animal shall be put to death.
the Message says anyone who has sex with an animal gets the death penalty. So, but anyway, it really is. When you remember those pictures of Moses coming down with the stones, Charlton Heston coming down the mountain with the stones, that's after the fact. God has already given them. So we know that somebody is pulling all this stuff together, trying to have it make sense. And these rules continued on. In the Jewish tradition, they still have courts where you can bring someone before the jury. It's usually a tribunal, 3 rabbis. Mm-hmm. And we've got the Torah, but there are extended rules beyond the 10 Commandments that cover a myriad of things. Mm-hmm. The whole cleanliness ritual. How is cleanliness accomplished? I had a friend who owned a funeral home back in Michigan, and they had one room for Jewish funerals because the funeral director does not touch a body in Jewish funeral, and they're not embalmed. If it's a man, there's a group of men who come in, they wash the body, wrap the body, place it in the coffin. If it's a woman, women come in and do that. It's a ritual process that's followed. And I asked Roger once, I said, well, what are the steps they go through? He said, I have no idea. Mm-hmm. He said, I know they wash the body because I hear water running. Mm-hmm. But it's not appropriate for a Gentile to be in observing that. Women, after their period, they have to, there are places that are like hot tubs where women go and they have to go through the rite of purification. In the Episcopal Church, we have a rite for women after they've had a child. Churching of the woman. I don't see it in the new prayer book, but it's in the old prayer book. That's a tradition. And not all denominations have that. which is one way of saying not all denominations are right. Like, but you see how these things get started, and we come to accept them as being, and for a Jew, not the gospel, but the law. And I don't know how you keep track of all of this, but
I like the part if you take the cloak of a man that's collateral, you have to give it back to them before night.
yes. Yeah, because
It's his only thing to sleep in.
All right. That was good.
so if you're taking collateral from someone, you need to say, is this the only cloak you have?
Right.
Yeah.
All right, we'll pick up with chapter 23.
Did you hear